When I first moved into Emerald Estates, I was enamored with the manicured lawns, pristine sidewalks, and overall sense of order. After years of apartment living, I'd finally saved enough to buy my modest dream home in what the real estate agent called the most desirable community in the county. The house wasn't enormous, a cozy 1,800 square feet with a decent backyard, but it was mine, and I was proud. What the agent conveniently glossed over, however, was the iron grip of the Emerald Estates Homeowners Association. During my first week, I found a neatly typed letter in my mailbox informing me that my garbage bin had been visible from the street for approximately 3.5 hours after collection, a violation of HOA Rule 37B. The fine was $50. I paid it, chalking it up to a rookie mistake. I'd learn the rules and adapt. After all, these regulations were what kept the neighborhood looking so perfect, right? Within a month, I'd received 2 more notices. One for having a garden hose improperly coiled in my side yard, $75 fine, and another for installing a bird feeder without prior approval from the Architectural Review Committee, $150 fine. I started to wonder if I'd made a terrible mistake. Then I met Karen Wilcox, the HOA president. She lived directly across the street in the largest house in our cul-de-sac. Her lawn was impossibly green year-round, her hedges trimmed with surgical precision. Her husband, Geoffrey, was on the city council, and they made sure everyone knew it. "We just have standards here," she explained with a tight smile when I questioned the bird feeder fine. "It's what separates Emerald Estates from other neighborhoods." The way she said "other neighborhoods" made it sound like she was referring to landfills. I nodded politely and retreated to my home, determined to simply follow the rules and stay under the radar. Little did I know that Karen had already marked me as a troublemaker for daring to question the sacred HOA bylaws. That night, as I was about to go to bed, the motion-activated floodlights outside my bedroom window suddenly blazed to life. I peeked through the blinds to see Karen standing at the edge of my property, clipboard in hand, examining something. By the time I threw on a robe and went outside, she was gone. The next morning, another envelope waited in my mailbox. A $200 fine for unapproved exterior lighting fixtures emitting excessive luminosity. The notice included a 3-page explanation of HOA-compliant lighting options, all available from a single approved vendor. At the bottom, in handwritten script, "Welcome to Emerald Estates." I stared across the street at Karen's immaculate home, the morning sun glinting off her luxury SUV. Through the front window, I could see her watching me, a cup of coffee in her hand, a satisfied smile on her face. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just living in a neighborhood with strict rules. I was living in a kingdom ruled by a petty tyrant who enjoyed wielding her power. And somehow, I'd already become her favorite target. The question was, how long would I put up with it before I fought back? The first major conflict arose when summer arrived with a vengeance. Temperatures soared into the high 90s for weeks, and water conservation measures went into effect. The HOA sent out a community-wide email detailing strict watering schedules, even-numbered houses on Mondays and Thursdays, odd-numbered on Tuesdays and Fridays, between 7 to 9 p.m. only. Despite these restrictions, I noticed Karen's lawn remained a verdant paradise. Her roses bloomed with defiant vigor while everyone else's gardens wilted under the merciless sun. Her sprinkler system seemed to run more frequently than allowed, but challenging the HOA president seemed unwise. One evening, while I was hand-watering my struggling tomato plants during my designated time slot, Karen marched across the street. She held her clipboard, the infamous violation tracker that struck fear into the hearts of homeowners. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying for the neighbors to hear. "Your garden hose nozzle is non-compliant with HOA regulations." I blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry." "Section 23.4, she continued, flipping pages with practiced efficiency. "All visible garden equipment must be in earth tones or forest green. That bright blue nozzle is expressly prohibited." She wrote something on her clipboard. "That's a $125 fine, and you'll need to replace it within 48 hours. I stared at my perfectly functional hose nozzle. You can't be serious. It's just a hose nozzle. No one can even see it from the street. I can see it, she replied coldly, and the bylaws are quite clear. We've had multiple complaints. From who? I challenged. Karen's smile tightened. Complaint sources remain confidential. You're new here, so I'll give you some advice. It's easier to just comply. Fighting the HOA never ends well for homeowners. She handed me the violation notice and walked away, pausing to admire her own lush lawn. That night, I received an email notification of the fine. When I tried to appeal it online, the system repeatedly crashed. When I called the HOA office the next day, the administrator informed me that appeals must be submitted within 24 hours, which had now passed. Reluctantly, I paid the fine and purchased an overpriced HOA-approved forest green nozzle from the single vendor listed in the HOA's recommended suppliers document. I later discovered this vendor was owned by Karen's brother-in-law. This was my introduction to how things really worked in Emerald Estates. Over the next few weeks, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Each day seemed to bring a new HOA violation notice. My garbage bin wheels weren't precisely aligned with the curb, $75. A delivery package remained visible on my porch for more than 4 hours, $100. The shade of white I used to touch up my fence trim was eggshell, when the approved color was antique ivory, $250 plus repainting costs. I tried appealing each violation, but the appeals committee, chaired by Karen's best friend Deborah, rejected every one. My monthly HOA administrative fees were quickly approaching my mortgage payment. Then came the water bill. It had doubled, then tripled over 3 months. I called the utility company, convinced there was a mistake. The representative suggested I might have a leak and recommended checking my meter. So on a scorching Saturday afternoon, I found myself kneeling beside the water meter at the edge of my property. What I discovered made my blood boil hotter than the summer sun. There was indeed a secondary line running from my meter, one I hadn't installed. I followed it, carefully digging along its path, only to find it snaking across the property line and toward Karen's immaculate backyard. I couldn't believe it. Karen, the HOA president, the self-appointed guardian of community standards, had tapped into my water line to keep her perfect lawn green while the rest of us paid premium rates during water restrictions. Fuming, I took photos, documented everything, and decided to confront her directly. That evening, I knocked on her door, phone in hand with the evidence. "Oh, that old line," she said dismissively after I showed her the photos. "That was installed years ago. Previous owners had an arrangement." Her face betrayed no shame, only mild annoyance at being questioned. "I don't have any arrangement, and I'm paying for water you're using," I replied firmly. Karen's expression hardened. "Listen, you're new here. There are ways things work in Emerald Estates. That line has been there for 15 years. If you start digging up utility connections without proper approval, you'll be violating Section 14 of the HOA covenant. That's a $500 fine, plus restoration costs." I stood there, mouth agape, as she continued. "Besides, my husband is on the City Council's utility committee. We could have your service interrupted for suspected tampering." With that, she closed the door in my face. That same afternoon, I met Bob, my neighbor on the right, who was also outside examining his water meter. "Let me guess," he said, seeing my shocked expression. "You just found the extra line?" "You know about this?" I asked incredulously. Bob shrugged. "Everyone with a property adjacent to Karen's knows. She's tapped into all of us. Try to fight it, and suddenly you'll have violations for things you didn't even know were in the bylaws. My advice? Accept it as the cost of living here." But I couldn't accept it. This wasn't just petty rule enforcement anymore. This was theft. The following week, I received what looked like an official notice from the city's water department on HOA letterhead. It stated that due to excessive water consumption, I was being placed on a water restriction plan, limiting my usage to specific hours. Any violation would result in a $1,000 fine from the HOA. This was absurd. Karen was stealing my water, and now she was restricting my usage. That same day, I submitted an application to the Architectural Review Committee to install a water-efficient garden in my backyard. It included native plants, a small pond that would attract beneficial wildlife, and a drip irrigation system that would reduce water usage by over 60%. I'd spent weeks researching and designing it, and even included letters of support from the local conservation society. 3 days later, I received a rejection notice. The reason? Inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetics and potential to attract unwanted wildlife. The notice was signed by Karen, who had apparently overridden the committee's vote. That evening, as I stared at the rejection letter, I watched through my window as Karen's sprinklers activated, outside of permitted hours, soaking her perfect lawn with water I was paying for. Next to my computer sat my latest water bill, $437.28, more than triple the neighborhood average. Something inside me snapped. I tried playing by the rules. I tried being reasonable. I'd even tried direct confrontation. Nothing worked because the game was rigged. Karen had created a system where she could steal resources, enforce rules selectively, and punish anyone who challenged her authority. The final straw came the next morning. I woke up to find an official HOA pre-lien notice taped to my door. It claimed I had accumulated $3,275 in unpaid fines and fees, and if not resolved within 30 days, the HOA would place a lien on my property, the first step toward foreclosure. Many of the violations listed were completely fabricated or grossly exaggerated. As I stood there holding the notice, my hands shaking with rage, I noticed Karen walking her poodle past my house, a satisfied smile on her face as she glanced at my door. In that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't be forced out of my home. I wouldn't continue paying for water that nourished her perfect lawn while my garden died. I wouldn't be bullied by this neighborhood tyrant anymore. If Karen wanted to play dirty, I could play dirty too. But unlike her, I would make sure everything I did was technically legal. I would beat her at her own game. I spent that night researching HOA laws, water rights, and property regulations. By morning, I had the beginnings of a plan, one that would not only stop Karen's theft, but would strike at the very thing she cared about most, her perfect emerald green lawn. My first step was gathering evidence. I requested copies of all HOA documents, bylaws, and meeting minutes for the past 5 years. As a homeowner, I had the right to access these records, though the HOA administrator seemed puzzled by my sudden interest in governance. What I discovered was illuminating. Karen had been president for 7 consecutive years, despite bylaws stipulating term limits of 2 consecutive 2-year terms. The board hadn't held proper elections in years. Financial reports showed suspicious landscaping expenditures that always went to the same company, owned by Karen's brother-in-law. More troubling were the selective enforcement patterns. Certain homes belonging to Karen's friends received warning notices for violations, while others, like mine, received immediate fines. The Architectural Review Committee had rejected proposals from some homeowners while approving identical changes for others. Armed with this knowledge, I executed the first part of my plan. I sent a formal letter to the HOA board, copying every homeowner, requesting an audit of HOA finances and an explanation for the violation of term limits. I cited specific bylaw sections and included copies of the relevant documents. The second part of my plan targeted the water theft directly. I consulted with a plumber friend who confirmed that the connection to my water line was illegal under state law. Rather than disconnecting it, however, I decided on a more elegant solution. My solution came from an unlikely source. My nephew's science fair project on plant growth and water feuds. Different plants thrive in different soil levels, and grass in particular prefers slightly acidic soil with a pH between 6.0 and 7.0. Push that pH too far in either direction, and grass struggles to absorb nutrients, eventually turning yellow and dying, no matter how much you water it. I purchased a 55-gallon drum, fitch testing equipment, and various compounds that could safely alter water feuds without being harmful to humans or animals. I set up this equipment in my garage, connecting it to my main water line before the illegal tap split off toward Karen's yard. Next, I installed a programmable valve system that would activate only during specific hours, precisely when Karen's sprinkler system typically ran. This way, my own water usage wouldn't be affected. The system was designed to gradually increase the pH of the water flowing to Karen's yard, making it more and more alkaline over time. Not enough to notice immediately, but enough to stress her precious Kentucky bluegrass over several weeks. For plausible deniability, I also installed a proper security camera system, approved by the HOA, of course, that would coincidentally document the location of the illegal water line without appearing to focus on it. By Labor Day weekend, everything was in place. I activated the system and waited. Meanwhile, my letter to the board had caused a stir. Several homeowners reached out privately, sharing their own stories of Karen's tyranny. Bob, who had warned me earlier, introduced me to a small group of neighbors who had been documenting HOA abuses for years but were afraid to act alone. With my evidence added to theirs, we now had a substantial case. The tide was beginning to turn. By early October, Karen's perfect lawn, her pride and joy, began showing signs of distress. It started with a small yellowish patch near her driveway. Nothing dramatic, just a slight discoloration that might be attributed to urine from a neighborhood dog. Karen, predictably, placed a small "Please curb your dog" sign at the spot. By the third week, several more yellow patches had emerged, creating a model defect across her formerly perfect lawn. From my security cameras, I watched Karen inspecting these spots with increasing frequency, her body language growing more agitated with each visit. The sprinklers began running even more often, now blatantly outside permitted hours. My water bill confirmed it. She was pumping enormous amounts of stolen water onto her lawn in a desperate attempt to revive it, but more alkaline water was only accelerating the problem. Meanwhile, my coalition of frustrated homeowners had grown. We created a private online forum to share evidence of HOA violations and Karen's selective enforcement. When we had enough documentation, we took a bold step. We called for an emergency HOA meeting, gathering enough signatures to force the board to comply under state law. The day before the meeting, Karen's response to our growing threat was predictable: a blizzard of violation notices. Every member of our coalition received multiple citations for increasingly absurd infractions. Mine included excessive moisture on driveway after morning dew, $150, and unapproved sonic resonance from wind chimes, $225. But her desperation only strengthened our resolve. At the emergency meeting, the community clubhouse was packed, a stark contrast to the usual empty chairs. Karen arrived late, flustered by the unprecedented turnout. She attempted to maintain control, but when we presented our documentation of bylaw violations, financial irregularities, and selective enforcement, the crowd grew increasingly hostile. Board member James Wilson, a retired accountant who had generally been Karen's ally, flipped through our financial evidence with growing concern. "These numbers don't match what's been presented to the board," he admitted. "I think we need an independent audit." Karen attempted to adjourn the meeting, citing procedural irregularities, but another board member, Susan Chen, spoke up. "I move that we vote on the audit proposal now." The motion passed overwhelmingly. As Karen stalked out of the meeting, I noticed for the first time how many people avoided eye contact with her. The fear she cultivated was evaporating. The next day, my security cameras caught Karen and her husband arguing with a professional landscaper in their front yard. The landscaper kept gesturing at the expanding yellow patches, shaking his head. When Karen pointed angrily at my house, I knew she was beginning to suspect something. That afternoon, I received an official notice. I was being fined $2,000 for unauthorized water line modifications in order to restore the original configuration immediately or face legal action. Rather than comply, I requested a formal hearing before the HOA board, as was my right under the bylaws. Karen, as president, would have to preside over this hearing. I scheduled it for the following week, giving her lawn ample time to deteriorate further. The balance of power was shifting. I could feel it. Called the following Tuesday, The turnout was unprecedented. Nearly 80% of homeowners attended, packing the community clubhouse. The atmosphere was that of a revolution in progress. Karen was conspicuously absent. Geoffrey attended in her place, attempting to maintain dignity as he announced her temporary leave of absence from HOA duties for personal reasons. The board, suddenly finding their spines, voted to launch a formal audit of HOA finances and practices over the past 5 years. They appointed an interim president, a retired judge who had frequently clashed with Karen over his bird feeders and wind chimes. As the meeting concluded, Geoffrey approached me in the parking lot. Gone was the swaggering city councilman. In his place stood a defeated man watching his wife's social standing collapse. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "To make this go away." "I want what everyone here wants," I replied. "A fair HOA that serves the community instead of punishing it. And I want my water bill paid back. All of it with interest." He nodded grimly. "The line will be removed tomorrow. You'll have a check by Friday." I smiled. "One more thing. The front landscaping I proposed in April that Karen rejected. I'll be installing it next weekend. I trust there won't be any objections." Geoffrey looked at what remained of his own dying lawn, then back at me. No objections. The hearing was set for a Tuesday evening in the community clubhouse. Normally, these meetings attracted only the board members and perhaps 1 or 2 homeowners. But word had spread, and the room was packed to capacity. Whispers and tension filled the air as I took my seat in the front row. The night before the hearing, I'd received an anonymous text. "Watch your back. Kay is desperate." I doubled my security measures and backed up all my evidence to multiple locations. This wasn't just neighborhood politics anymore. This felt dangerous. Karen entered 15 minutes late, her signature power suit looking unusually wrinkled. The yellow patches on her lawn had now merged into a sickly expanse that neighborhood children had nicknamed the dead zone. Her previously immaculate appearance had deteriorated along with her lawn, her hair less perfectly styled, dark circles under her eyes. "Let's get this over with," she said sharply, banging the gavel. She glared at the unexpectedly large audience. "This is a private hearing." Board member Susan Chen interrupted. "Actually, HOA bylaws clearly state all hearings are open to all homeowners unless they involve private personnel matters." Karen's mouth tightened, but she nodded curtly and called my case. A strange calm settled over me as I approached the podium. I prepared for this moment for weeks. "I'm here to address the accusation of unauthorized water line modifications." I began pleasantly. "But before we discuss that, I'd like to present evidence of water theft that has been occurring on my property for the past several months." Karen's face drained of color. I methodically presented my case, displaying photographs, water bills, and finally, the piece de resistance, a time-lapse video from my security camera showing the illegal water line and tracking the steady deterioration of Karen's lawn as my altered water took effect. "As you can see," I explained calmly, "not only has Ms. Wilcox been stealing water from my property, but the recent decline in her lawn's health corresponds directly with my installation of a water quality management system, which I have every legal right to install on my own property." I turned to face Karen directly. "The system alters the pH of my water to a level that happens to be detrimental to Kentucky bluegrass. Had you been using your own water supply, this wouldn't have affected your lawn at all." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. A woman in the back called out, "She stole my water too." "Order," Karen shouted, banging her gavel frantically. "This is absurd. These accusations err." "True," interrupted James Wilson, the retired accountant on the board. "I've reviewed the evidence, and it's compelling. Ms. Wilcox, would you care to explain the water line connection?" Karen's composure finally cracked. "It was here before I moved in. Previous owners had arrangements. Besides, that doesn't excuse deliberate sabotage of my lawn." I smiled. "I didn't touch your property, Karen. I simply treated my own water you were stealing. If you'd like to pursue this legally, I'd be happy to meet you in court, where we can also discuss the felony theft of utilities you've been committing." At that moment, The clubhouse door opened with dramatic timing, and a uniformed police officer walked in, followed by two people in suits who introduced themselves as investigators from the district attorney's office, specializing in HOA fraud. We received quite an interesting package of documents, one explained, looking directly at Karen. Financial records showing misappropriation of funds, evidence of utility theft, falsified HOA election records. Enough to warrant a formal investigation. The room fell into stunned silence. I hadn't expected this development. Someone else had apparently been building a case against Karen as well. Karen's husband, Jeffrey, burst in, red-faced and sweaty. "This meeting is adjourned," he shouted. "As legal counsel for the HOA, I advise everyone to leave immediately." "Actually," said the female investigator, "we'd advise everyone to stay. We have some questions about the HOA finances and operations." She turned to face the room, "and we encourage anyone with additional information to come forward." One by one, neighbors began to stand. Bob from next door was first. "She's been stealing my water for 3 years," he said, voice shaking with emotion. "When I complained, she threatened to have the city condemn my property." The elderly couple from the corner rose next. "She had our garden gnomes forcibly removed while we were on vacation," the husband said, "called them lawn pollution, and fined us $500. Then came the single mother who'd nearly lost her home over fabricated violations. "She targeted me after I refused to hire her brother's company to remodel my kitchen," she explained, tears in her eyes. Each testimony emboldened others. Soon, a dozen neighbors were lined up, waiting to share their stories. The investigators took detailed notes, occasionally exchanging glances that suggested this case was bigger than they'd anticipated. Karen, trapped and cornered, made a desperate final play. "This is a conspiracy," she shouted, pointing at me. "He damaged my property. He poisoned my lawn. That's vandalism, destruction of property." The lead investigator turned to me. "Is this true? Did you damage her lawn?" "No," I replied calmly. "I simply installed a water treatment system on my own property, completely legal and properly permitted. I have documentation. I handed over the permits. If Ms. Wilcox's lawn was affected by water coming from my property, perhaps she should explain why she was stealing that water in the first place." Jeffrey grabbed Karen's arm, whispering urgently in her ear. Her face contorted with rage, but she finally fell silent. "I think we have enough to proceed with our investigation," the lead investigator announced. "Ms. Wilcox will need you to come to our office tomorrow morning to answer some questions. In the meantime, I'm recommending that the board place you on administrative leave from your HOA duties." The board voted immediately and unanimously to remove Karen pending the investigation. Even her loyal allies abandoned her, seeing which way the wind was blowing. As the meeting concluded, homeowners lingered, talking animatedly. Many approached me with handshakes, hugs, and thanks. The atmosphere was celebratory, like a dictator had fallen and freedom had returned to a small nation. Karen and Jeffrey slipped out a side door, avoiding the crowd. Through the window, I watched them hurry to their luxury SUV. Karen looked back once at the clubhouse, her expression a mixture of hatred and disbelief. Then they drove away into the night. Eleanor, the retired teacher, appeared at my side. "You know this isn't over, right? People like Karen don't go down easily." "I know," I replied, "but neither do I." As the last homeowners departed, I stood alone in the clubhouse parking lot, looking across at Karen's house, dark except for a single upstairs light. Her lawn gleamed sickly yellow-brown under the streetlights, a physical manifestation of her corrupted power. The battle had been won, but Eleanor was right. The war wasn't over. Karen had connections throughout local government. She had resources and a vindictive nature, and now she had nothing left to lose. I drove home slowly, watching my rearview mirror. The taste of victory was sweet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's final move was yet to come. 6 months later, Emerald Estates was transformed. The spring morning was perfect as I stood in my front yard, admiring my newly installed native plant garden, the same design Karen had rejected as inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetics. After the explosive hearing, Events had moved quickly. Karen and Jeffrey Wilcox resigned from all HOA positions the following day, citing personal reasons. 3 weeks later, their house went on the market with a listing that described it as having renovation potential and an opportunity to design your own landscaping vision. They moved out on a gloomy Tuesday without farewells. The district attorney's investigation revealed years of financial impropriety, inflated landscaping contracts awarded to relatives, administrative fees that went directly to Karen, selective enforcement used to target homeowners who challenged her authority. Several board members faced misdemeanor charges, while Karen and Jeffrey were charged with more serious offenses, including utility theft and fraud. The new HOA board, democratically elected for the first time in years, was led by retired Judge Martin Thompson, who had frequently clashed with Karen over his bird feeders and wind chimes. Their first act was commissioning a complete review of the bylaws. "We need rules that protect the community, not punish it," Judge Thompson announced at his first meeting. The new board eliminated excessive fines, simplified the approval process for home improvements, and established a transparent financial reporting system. They also created a Good Neighbor Committee focused on community assistance rather than enforcement. My water bill had returned to normal levels. The settlement from the Wilcoxes covered my legal fees plus damages for years of stolen water. I used some of the money to install a rainwater collection system that further reduced my water consumption. Most satisfying of all was the transformation of the neighborhood itself. The once fearful community had become vibrant and supportive. Monthly block parties replaced combative HOA meetings. Long competitions gave way to community garden initiatives. As I stood admiring my garden, Bob from next door approached with a coffee cup in hand. "Have you heard the latest?" he asked with a grin. "What now?" "The Wilcoxes bought a condo downtown. No yard at all." He chuckled. "And guess what? The building has an even stricter HOA than ours was. Apparently, Karen tried to run for board president and got exactly 0 votes." We both laughed, and I bent down to check on my new butterfly garden. A monarch fluttered past, landing delicately on a milkweed plant, a sight that would have earned me a citation 6 months ago. That afternoon, I attended my first meeting as a member of the Community Garden Committee. We were planning a neighborhood workshop on water conservation techniques. As I presented my ideas to the enthusiastic group, I couldn't help but think about the irony. Karen's water theft had ultimately led to a more sustainable community. The plaque on my desk at work reads, "The grass isn't always greener on the other side, especially when you're stealing the water to make it that way." A gift from my neighbors, it reminds me daily that sometimes justice comes in unexpected forms. And every time it rains, I raise a silent toast to Karen Wilcox and her perfect lawn, the perfect lawn that no longer exists. But my community, it's flourishing like never before.